it's like, this is sort of sneaky because you've got malice and forethought. You've seen him coming. I see him coming from across the room. Wah, wah, wah. And because I see him coming, I think, I'm going to get my center just doing this little dance. This little snaky thing going on in here. And as he approaches, he's approaching. And the snaky thing's going on. Wah, wah, wah. But I'm not doing it snaky big enough that he's like, whoa, there's a snaky guy over there. I'm doing this little weird figure 8 thing. It's happening. It's happening very, very small. Hey, you're looking at me? Yeah, I'm looking at you, blah, 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 blah. And then on contact, the snaky thing's already doing its thing to him. And he's like a half step behind. Cool? So if you get enough warning that you can take about a half step back and get your center in motion, get your weight on your balls, your feet, have just a little tiny internal activity go on. When they do make contact, however they do, their mechanism has to account for that difference, has to account for that little disturbance, has to account for the change in the weather. It's not what they thought they were grabbing a hold of. It's not that what they thought they were hitting. They're actually hitting something that's already in motion, it's already transferring energy, it's already dancing on, and they arrived that they weren't planning on. Cool? So try that a little bit. Same thing, but get it going before they make contact moments. So I'm with Chris. Where you at, Chris? And we make a little change, and his body compensates and he takes a step. That's another time. That's another time. That's a whoa. Oh! You follow him around. You don't try to drive him to the next thing. You wait and look at what is about to happen. So I'm going to be, and you're going to go slow motion. So you make your activity and it affects me somehow. There we go. And I'm now on one foot. And I have to purposely slow this and dampen it so that it's easy to talk about. It's still physical duress, I got to tell you. I'm standing on one leg, but I'm having to slow this all down so that we can have a discussion about it. As my foot's about to do the next thing, he can tell you, I suspect, where it's about to go, but even if he doesn't, he just knows it's about to happen. I'm about to break loose with this foot from the ground, and it's about to land somewhere. And as it does, don't try to throw me with that. Just try to make a change at that moment. And in between, be like zero. Be like just equal sign. Equal sign. So here it goes. And the foot's about to land, and just as it makes purchase, right as my weight goes on it, right there, make your change. Make your change. Ooh, yeah, right. And it's just an ounces of difference change. It's not foot pounds. It's not big and heavy. And now I'm like, woo, I'm a tightrope walker. Shit, this is worse than it was a second ago. And, I better pick something up again. So that same foot's about all I got to work with. And so again, I said, I got to get out of this damn thing. And boom, and right there, as my weight goes, right there, that's when you'll make your change. Cool? And I'm hung in off balance. And I hang out in the stick, and I feel what I got to do to compensate and come out of this and try to stand back up like a normal human being. And as I attempt that, I wish I was a gorilla right now, because I have a hand down there. Wouldn't I? That'd be easier. This is really awful, this bilateral movement of both feet. It's like, damn, just walking on 2 legs things. And so, yeah, here it goes. Boom. Oh. He did a big thing. He did a big thing. He did that to me in Rondoria. I was talking to him. Right now we're talking about it. So think about, let's go back. Let's rewind this one. And you got me like this, right? Do exactly the same thing. Make it about half that. So I'm in this duress. I take this step. Yeah. That would do it. And each problem I'm winding up having to solve is accruing on my internal ability to do this problem-solving activity. And my nervous system and my subconscious is getting under greater and greater duress the longer this whole thing goes on. And eventually, I'll just get in harmony with gravity by laying down. All this standing up is fighting gravity. Laying down, harmony, fighting. So, right, it's like the internal mechanism just enough. Or you try to take the compensatory step and it's impossible. You just cannot make the next step at all. But that guy's job, never try to throw you. Always just try to give you the change at the right moment. And for now, we'll call the right moment as the weight goes on the foot. Okay? That's not the only right moment. There are other right moments too. But that's a pretty good target to start with. Cool? Okay, try to think. You're doing your activity to the guy. Is when we're doing what we're doing, there's a tendency to be kind of one-sided with things. And more, going back to the stuff we were dealing with yesterday about internally centering yourself and working with your center. If I want to go forward through him with this line, at the same time to balance that structure, if I go forward to him with this line in an unbalanced way, I wind up putting myself into one foot stick. If I go forward into this line and at the same time I'm balancing backward into that line, I'm still square in space. I'm still, if he breaks loose, I'm not in the rest. But if I overbalance, or I've done this in a non-centered way, I do the same activity and he breaks loose, and there's actually a little thing that I have to go through. So that means if I'm going to do things that way, I also have to be centered that way. If I'm going to do things this way, I also have to be centered. If I'm turning in this direction, this is turning in that direction. There's an equalizing effect up and down, forward, backward, side to side, that you want to kind of get used to in your being, so that nothing's moving independent. All right? If otherwise I would move this independently, I would have this still and this is going. If that's going to move, this whole thing's going to move. This whole thing's going to move. This whole thing's going to move. And if I want to go down, there's also something stretching up through my spine going up. If I want to go up, there's also something balancing down. There's something balancing left to right, side to side, circle forward, circle back. And it's sort of it's hard to describe. You're after a way of keeping your center that stays in this self-sufficient, balanced format, even while it's doing these jobs for you. It's sort of how to describe it. Cool? Cool. So you might just think about that. We do the same exercise. And also, we have a habit of working here, kind of inside line, almost grappling range like judo. Because it's real easy. Start incrementally. Getting out to your range of motion. Mr. Tomiki's original walk, he didn't do this, he did that. And he's talking about all the way out at the end of your very far range of motion for your normal standing posture. And even way out here, even barely touching the guy. And I do this to him forward and do this thing back. His body's got to live with that. The knees are bending, but they're not just bending, they're pulling forward at the same time, too. If I just bend my knees, that's like I'm dropping, and my knees are bending, but I'm not really compensating with the up. What happens when you bend your knees this way is they pull forward, and there's this sense of rising out of this. It's your bending knees. It's very distinct difference. Very distinct difference. It's a lot more work. Bending your knees like squatting down is relatively easy to do. This is a lot of work. And on contact, you make the change. But see how wide you can do it? So you're not just habitually stuck in this closer state. And then it'll be more challenging. Hey, I can make it work here, but then I get about here, it gets tougher. So go back to where it's easier, and then just adjust little tiny increments. And see if you can work out like that. So, the last thing we did about working at range and going out to this extreme crazy range is highly useful and relevant when you're dealing with different sized people. As long as you're dealing with people your size, you can kind of afford to work in this middle zone right in here where he's hitting me and I'm hitting him, and we're kind of in this semi-judo-ish range. When you're dealing with a discrepancy, like you and I, or oh, here's the discrepancy. She and I, at this range, me affecting her, her affecting me, is relatively equal. She can drop body weight into me and affect me. Go ahead, yeah. And my size and build and shape and whatever isn't a big deal. We close that range a little more. Let's go right here. Do it again. Good work. Good. She's still pretty close to cool. So yeah, it's taking her a little more effort. Now let's go. Yeah. And we get a little closer. And because I'm a giant mass and she's a smaller mass, natural dampening happens. And without trying to, she killed herself. I didn't do that to her. All of it. But as the closer we get, the more the big mass gets to decide where we're going. And the more we're back out to arm's length, the smaller mass can have an equal say-so. So it's like an equalizer. And that's important when you get tangled up with somebody. You're tangled up with somebody and it's all cool. And then we get a little closer and man, this ain't cool no more. And you think, wow, it's not cool. So get back out to range. Be cool again. Okay? So one of the things you got to be confident at is all the way to your end of your range of motion, so that when you are getting overblown, when suddenly you got a monster on your hands, and it's not even close to a fair deal, and you're tangled up and it's getting clunky, you have a place to go. Because as long as you're stuck in that close range, and it's everything getting shut down, and everything's getting hard, and it's wow, you can't get there from here, and you don't know what to do. If you can't step back and get your space, it's very difficult. Very difficult. So it's like a secret weapon. And it also extends through other secret weapons. So we have this object. We're going through. We no longer have the point of contact. We have the inanimate object between us. And we want to do the same game through this object. And the same pressure change. And it's weirder. It's weirder because you still have to do the job, but transmit it through the length of the weapon, whatever it is. That's a short length, and then we make it a little longer length. Let's see about... And do the same games through the lengths of the weapons and see what that's like. And it takes a little while, because if I overblow it, suddenly he gets back to balance. I added too much energy, and suddenly he got a whole bunch of signal, and he's standing there, Mr. Cool again. So the sensitivity to the pressure changes, even when you're gripping, have to become part of the deal. Okay? Then, well, let's just do those first. Okay? First, back out to range, which we did already. And now put a weapon in there. And you can hold it with two hands. Don't hold it with two hands, just like square in front of you. Yeah. And you just come up and put your hand on it. And your first job is just to feel through this point of contact, in through that wood, into his structure. So right now I'm into his shoulders. Now I'm feeling down his spine. I'm into his center. Now I can get a foot if I want. Right? And you sort of do it, it's a feel deal. You just see if you can feel his structure through him. And if you have a hard time sensing what I'm talking about, you just kind of have your partner give you feedback. So I'm holding this stick. And Joe, you do it to me. Let go. You put a hand there. And so say Joe has a hard time feeling structure. He doesn't have much of a hard time. But you're in my elbows, Joe. You're in my elbows. Get up into my shoulders. Come on. Okay, I'm feeling you in my shoulders. Now take that down my spine. Good. And you're into my right hip right now. You're going down to my right foot, aren't you? Is that what it feels like to you? That's what it feels like to me. You give them feedback so that they get an auditory reference point of what's going on. Now I'm going to try to get into you. So right now I think I'm all the way up your arm and your shoulders. And now I think, where am I at now? Yeah, I'm in your center, aren't I? And now how about now? Toes. Yeah, you're right. I'm right too. I've done it a few times. So, with very little pressure, you can read into the structure you're dealing with, even through this non-human surface to work with. Cool? Try that first, and then we'll actually get some activity going. Okay? Cool. Try. Get a stick. Get some sticks. You can take it away anywhere you like. I know, you're very nervous. I'll just hold it like this. Hold it like this, and however you want to hold it. Yeah, I'll make it easy. Yeah, that's his job. And as he takes it away, I want to get sensitive to the mechanical action of that and follow it. Without adding any force. He never felt anything pushing. He just felt that as he picked it up, it just went further than it went. Now, it doesn't have to always go straight back into him. He can try to turn it and do all kinds of funny things. I would suggest, as uke, to go real slow. So you hold the stick. Okay. Thank you. So if I'm going to get exotic with it, this is not particularly exotic. And as he follows that, it's going to put me into backfall. Yeah, everything's going to rush into me. If I start doing, hey, I think I'll do it like this, and I get a little energy in me, and he follows that well, that's going to be a cartwheel. Right? So go real slow and let them have an easy ride to follow, and then build up speed if your routine is appropriate for that. But you know, how fast and hard it goes up to you. And I kind of think it's probably wiser to say, hey, give me that stick. And I'm not ever going to do anything really crazy aggressive. I'm going to give me that stick. Hey, push that away from the door. And his job is to follow the thing. Cool? Cool? Questions? Follow it and try to keep jiku. Try to keep equal pressure. Try to just equalize the pressure, period. Because now we're taking a stick, and he's taking it away from us. And so to equalize the pressure, I have to stay with his action and move with it. And just keep him there. And he doesn't have to stay there. He can fall down, or he can push out of it. But you're dealing with conscious intention. And then he's got to eat that effect. He's got to eat this effect. Yeah. And go to places that he can't stand up. No conscious intent to throw him. I'm just consciously trying to follow and stay in relationship and keep pressure zero. And if the stick comes whacking at me, I try not to get hit in the nose. I mean, that's kind of important too. But generally, it's all about following the stick. Cool? Cool. So yeah, try it. Slowly. Light. And it'll help reinforce following. Because what? We want to stay behind them in time so they can't catch up to us. We want to stay smaller than the actions they're doing. We don't want to stay equal to or bigger. We don't want to add extra energy so that now our intentionality is what they get to follow. We want to make sure we're following their intention. When they have a big obvious intention, it becomes a little easier. And it's like, oh, just follow that thing. And you follow it until it goes to its natural state. And as it tries to come out of that, it'll make another state change. And those vulnerabilities start to become apparent to you after a little while. And just do it as light and delicate as you can for a good long while. Cool? And yeah, it's a pretty useful little game. Chuck Caldwell did this for years. And he wouldn't even grip it. He'd hold it palm up, a stick in his hand like this basically, and have 2, 3, 4 guys, one after another, just do whatever they could come up with for 10, 20, 30 minutes at a time sometimes. And just throw it like this. Boom, boom. And he was using probably about 3 to 4 ounces of pressure most of the time. His feet moved freely, turned in every direction. Whatever kind of change that would happen in the orientation of that stick, he would just stay concentrated on it and keep his whole body reactive behind it. Very light touch, very equal sign, and let it go to its natural conclusions. Go to where the posture was basically so asymmetrical that the structure was right. It takes a little while, but it's readily doable. So, any questions, reflections, concepts, feedback, anything at all from today or the rest of the weekend? Anything you want to see again, talk about again, hear about it? Yeah?
This helped a lot.
Did it help?
Yeah, it was really getting to where I knew what the other person was doing and
Sweet.
not.
Sweet. It's not as big a mystery, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and feeling, especially when it was there, you know, when they were about to, and that span of time between one motion and the next.
Those little
where I
gaps,
go with that.
those little moments when you gotta be sensitive to, oh, he's about to take a step and do it. Oh, there it is.
Feeling, yeah, pressure like the.
Nice. Good. I'm glad that's up. Yeah.
Question about like usefulness of like locks and stuff.
Usefulness of locks. Joint locks. Joint locks are expressions of connection in which we're going to the complete range of motion in the person's body. They're not a form of pain delivery. They're not a form of punishment. They can sometimes be somewhat useful as suggestions of direction, but I wouldn't lean heavily in those directions, you know? It's sort of like you want to feel the full range of motion in the activity of the joint of their body, and everybody's going to be built a little different. So again, you're sensitizing to that wide range. Anymore, I'm more fascinated with suspending them in these states of being stuck than I am with concluding with some sort of terminal completion of the range of motion thing. When we do the completion of the range of motion thing, we're actually training in part of the paradigm whereby we're imbuing in our nervous system the capacity and tendency to go to a debilitating ending. We're actually, we say, hey, we're doing this really cool thing and we're going to this joint lock at the end of this technique. And then I bend and I put my pressure here and he pats out. And you're putting yourself in places where you can easily destroy that joint, where the force is overwhelming and you should have an overwhelming advantage in the mechanical structure in those places. And they're all places where if you took the context of our training out of civilization and said we're in wartime, and you're dealing with people that are disposable because they're trying to kill you and your family and your buddies, and you're trying to kill them and their family and their buddies, and it's all a bunch of war, it's very reasonable tools because it's less than lethal and it is debilitating. So in that case, you know, hey, I'm tearing his shoulder apart, or I'm breaking his arm, or I'm busting his leg, but at least I'm not breaking his neck. At least I'm not, you know, suffocating him to death. You know. It's less than lethal by and large, but it is injurious. And so all of those locking mechanisms that we do as a form of immobilization, or as a form of, oh, I'm just going to lock them down and be the stud, that's actually not what it ends at. That's a fiction. That's a fiction to preserve a skill set for times of war. When you're not dealing with anything like civilized behavior, when it's life and death, those things are useful. I de-emphasize it because the context we're dealing with, it's usually not appropriate. If I had the burden of being a law enforcement officer and I had to put cuffs on people, it starts getting important again. The adversarial relationship means I can't just get away with defending myself. I actually have to defend myself and incapacitate that fool and lock his ass up and put him in my car. You know? Or if the burden of my existence is that I have to be in war and I can't afford to deal politely with that SOB, I've just got to take him out of action so I can go deal with this and save my buddy. Well then, it's perfectly reasonable. You don't do a nice joint block. You break the arm and you keep on going. And these are ways to go about that sort of process, you know, because while the enemy is standing there with a broken arm, they have a hard time fighting. They get preoccupied generally. Not everybody. There are tough people, you know. But there are elevations of injurious things that become pretty distracting. And they wind up having to deal with just triage and taking care of the injury. So that's kind of what that's all about. And normal play, I'd say for most civilians, you know, it's good to know it, it's good to teach it, good to have it in your background. Not the emphasis. But Professions, certain professions, very important. Yeah.
But it's good to know the biomechanics of
Absolutely.
how it works, how a wrist, how the bones are
And
played.
how you would deliver the energy. And so at the ends, you have these things where you stand here and you lock this here, and you lock this here, and you put this in their armpit, and you stretch this all the way up, and then your center drops here, and that's symbolic of your center. Drop it right there, perhaps. And this completely disarticulated. Right. Because it's not a pleasant thing. It's ugly, and it's noisy, and it's messy, and it's loud, and it's awful. And if at all possible, you don't want to have to participate in ever in your rational, civilized, normal life. If you can avoid having to tear somebody's arm out of socket, please do. Please do. There's no, unless you're a psychopath and it gives you a jolly or something, you know, and if that's the case, then run away from me, damn it. I don't want you around. But if you have any choice, please avoid it. Because it's awful. And people go towards those conclusions sometimes recklessly. And more often than not, I've seen them used recklessly than used skillfully and used ethically. More often than not, I've seen them used in moments where the guys are saying, well, you can't do that to me. Yes, I can. No, you can't. You can't do that on part of me. Oh, yes, I can. And I've been in that state, and I've done it, and I felt really awful afterward. Like, why does this guy have to walk around in a sling for 6 weeks? Because I just couldn't talk him into reality. Why did I have to prove it? That's not worth it. It's not worth it, you know? And I did try to talk him out of it like 4 or 5 times in a row. Army Ranger dude. Walking guitar don't work. I don't think you understand this. Well, you can't do it to me. Yeah, I know, dude. I feel what you're trying there, man. Please don't do that. You know, and I tried and I tried. And then some part of me that I'm not proud of, as a young black belt, said, well, okay, I'll show you what it really is. You just got to know, you know. And looking back at that, oh, that's not cool. You know, I was not a very skillful teacher at that moment. And so I tend to go away from those and say, hey, you know, be cool with that stuff. That is not lethal usually, but it is very injurious and people pay big prices. And it's probably not worth it most of the time for most of what we're going to wind up with. So, yeah, you want to learn it. You want to know the biomechanics. You want to know what it's like and what you do with it. What you do with it are usually fairly crude things. Almost all of them, if you just took a fall, you know, we do all these falls in class every day. We just go immediately and rapidly to the center of the earth with your center of gravity from those positions. Most of them, that's what does it. You know, whether you go to a knee or you go to your ass, it's all pretty bad. And those things, yeah, the probabilities of them walking around with something not only broken, a broke arm, hey, the bone broke, not only broken, but disarticulated. You know, that's you've got the chicken thing, when you pop the chicken thing out of the thing and it makes that little noise. It's disarticulation that's actually worse, because that's like surgeries and stuff to put it back together. It's not like just throw it in a cast. It's like open it all up and tie things back together. And then, it's a big long game. So a lot of these things are really, really debilitating and really dangerous that way. So that's what that is, okay? So do it, but do it like with kid gloves. Do it delicate, sugar plum fairy. Do it like it's just a special effect for special occasions, and when you're playing with each other with it, it is just the lightest little nothing. De-emphasize it, and it'll stay a little safer, and your injury rate in your dojo will stay lower. And if you go the other direction and say, hey, prove it to me, can't do that to me. If we get like that with each other a lot, people will prove it. People will, you know. And ow, the wages of that is walking around going, ow, for a long time. Sometimes years. Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to know, how did you find us as a group for the 3 days?
I found you as a group delightful.
What are your questions, comments, and reflections?
My questions, comments, and reflections. Woo, you guys like long sessions. This has been a delightful group. I've had a great time, and it's been a lot of great energy and a lot of warmth, and I've had a great time with it. It's always very gratifying to work with folks that have energy and enthusiasm for what you're putting down. I used to teach university English, composition and literature, and at the same time I'd go to the dojo at night and teach at the dojo. And that's where I first noticed the contrast. You go to a teaching profession, you walk in and you're teaching, composition for writing 5-paragraph essays for kids so that they can learn how to survive the first few years of college. And it is a survival skill, but they won't invest in it even though it's a survival skill, They want the grade. They just want the grade so that they can get the course out of the way, so that they can get the degree, so that they can go get the job they have planned, and so they can get some more money. And your course doesn't really count. It's just a piece in a big puzzle, and it doesn't really make any difference to them. And you work with student after student after student, and that's where they're coming from, and there's no energy coming back to you. You're trying to contribute to their well-being, you're trying to give them something useful, and it's just like the energy just goes out there and dies. It feels pretty hollow. That's how it felt to me. It didn't at the start because I didn't really notice that until I would go to the dojo. I'd go to the dojo at night and teach Aikido and Judo and Jodo, and there would be this circular effect. I would put energy out and information and teaching and whatever, and it would come back to you. The energy would just build and sort of take on a life of its own, and it had that enthusiasm you put out teaching would come back to you. And it was like, wow. And that's what this weekend's been like for me. It's been really juicy that way. A lot of people activating around what we're playing with and having a good time and having this contributing to the total picture. And I think that's just where it's at. Because there's a lot of things we could be doing, but we're doing stuff to make each other, to build each other up. There's a lot of martial arts. You go in and you have a few bad dogs and you have everybody else who's their chew toys. And it's sort of a stable of monsters that gets developed. And it's, like dysfunctional families. There's going to be some people barking and some other people being the victims, and there's some other people, just trying to keep it all going so we can do it again tomorrow. And a whole bunch of martial arts cultures built around that. And then there's this sort of thing, which is a different ethic that really goes back to Kano, who was the first one to put it into words that I run across, and said, hey, you and I got to shine together. If we're going to come and spend a significant amount of our time and life together for hours and hours a day, doing these weird activities, preserving ancient traditions and knocking the hell out of each other, it can't just be about knocking the hell out of each other. It's got to be about making you better and me better at the same time. We got to both shine together. Mutual welfare and benefit is how it was translated widely. Literally, you, me, shine together. And that, I think, is what happens when we do it well. When a dojo is operating well, that's what's going on. Everybody's rising together. Nobody's there's the one star and everybody else is their fodder. You don't see that kind of pattern. Everybody starts building up skill sets. And we're all in our relative levels of skill sets, and we're all in our relative levels of how we're getting better, but everybody's rising. And nobody's being used at the expense of the other people to get from here to there. And that's pretty critical. And I've felt that here, and that's what I see happening here, and I'm really gratified by that. Because it's not the case some places. Not the case at all. Cool. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, y'all are doing a great thing, and I'm happy to participate. It's delightful. Anything else you want us to reflect on? It's your last few minutes. If there's anything left.
You've given us plenty to think about. Greatly appreciate you coming, of course.
Well, thank you.
And a wealth of information and knowledge to add to and bolster up what we do and make it better. The next time we'll have a deeper understanding and we can get some more.
Well, it does just get more and more. There are a few things that you can spend. It's been about 30 years for me. And the more I research it and the more I play with it, the more is still out there to get. So a lot of things you do for 10, 15, 20 years, and you kind of get to the end of the rope. You're sort of pushing the edge of the body of knowledge, kind of, you know. More limited subsets of things out there that we invest ourselves in. And after a while, you've kind of done everything there is to do with it. And these, I don't know, there's something about these, but I think part of it's that variability in bodies, and variability in personalities, and variability in structures you're dealing with. And some of it has to do with just that natural chaos that gets into the system there, but it stays very stimulating for long periods of time. Long periods of time. So I think it's worthwhile to invest in. There's a lot of fun things to do. If you don't feel like doing it, it's okay, but I like it, and I'm glad to do it. So, it's cool. Well, I think we're about there. Is it 2?
I'm close to it.
Close to it. Okay. I'm supposed to hit the road and try to avoid the storms and make my wife happy. So I'm probably not going to hang around a whole lot with you guys. But if you have questions, or you have topics that come up, or you have anything, feel free to contact me. Okay? I'm on Facebook and I'm on the internet. And my email address is very simple. It's just nick@windsongdojo.com. And there's over 1,000 videos to watch if you're just completely out of your mind. If you haven't got enough to listen to me talk, then go watch those. I get long-winded. I was a little too long-winded yesterday. But anyway,
It's all information.
we have get-togethers elsewhere. In Oklahoma City, the next one will be in June, and it'll be in all for disaster relief, or probably storms and tornadoes, since it's the season we're in. It goes to the Red Cross and helps out. They show up to moor every once in a while, and people don't have houses, and they pass out water and put roofs over people's heads. So basically, we dump the money in those directions for this event, and we got teachers coming in from all over the country to do it, and it should be a hell of a deal. And by donation to you, you just chip in whatever you want. 4 days of training, as much as you like, or you don't have to do the whole thing. That's not convenient either. And we have a good time. We have a good time, and you're all welcome. And happy to have you. We usually do another thing in December. It's usually smaller, but have a good time with that as well. Oh, Howard Pocket, yeah. One of my buddies, who's the Dojo fellow, he and his partner Joe Brogna are coming in October for a 3 or 4 day deal. I can't remember how many days. And a lot of the teaching methodology and this internal stuff, he's opened my eyes to. I had a feel for it because my teacher would do it, but he didn't have ways of talking about it or explaining it very well. It didn't fit with the way he set up his teaching paradigm, and his explanatory power didn't go in those directions. So a bunch of the different goodies that we've done this past few days are heavily influenced by Howard Pocket and Joe Brogna and their work. And so it's a pushing toward the Daito route into the spectrum, and if you want to get a dose of it straight from them, I highly encourage it, because they have areas of refinement in this stuff that I'm still pretty, well, in the way they talk, they say, oh, well, you suck, but you suck a little less than you did yesterday, so. That's just how they talk. That's just how they talk. And but they're right. Everybody starts, and you're just trying to suck a little less.
They're mildly deficient.
What's that?
So they're mildly deficient.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Get a hold of me. No, be a little more dickish. Yeah. They have this East Coast kind of in your face mode about them, but it's really delightful, and they're a lot of fun, and they really know how to translate their skill sets into a broader population that doesn't necessarily speak their language. They have a great facility for doing that, and they have masterful ways of transmitting these little activities. So it's not about, for me at least, it's not about learning the Daito system that they teach. It's about learning how they teach it, and learning how they transmit those skills. Ow, are you okay? Great. Drop it on your foot. Okay. So yeah, they're coming, and there's other great events coming up, and so yeah, just check it out online.